We are good to go.
All right, so I'll go ahead and kick it off. So, a bit of background on me. I've been in the community space for a little while. Might have seen a thing or two over the years. And the first question you're probably asking yourself is, how many of those communities do you actually check on a regular basis? And it's actually probably only closer to like 15 to 20. But I just like to keep my pulse super close on what's new and topical in community building world. Always looking for interesting things that community builders are, or tactics that community builders are employing, utilizing, ways in which they're engaging members, different types of themes, missions, and movements that folks are building communities around. So very much plugged into this space, and I have been for quite a while. So maybe a bit of more background and context is that I've been building internet communities and participating in our communities for probably close to over the past 12 years, I guess, before community building was vogue and before community building became a tech Twitter buzzword topic. I've also been a data scientist. I ran an internal community at JP Morgan, so used to work in finance and banking, and most recently co-founded a few different startups and initiatives, namely a company called Comstore, where we were building B2B enterprise SaaS software for companies' community teams. You can kind of think of it as like a Salesforce type system for a community team. Raised a fair amount of money from a whole host of different angel investors and 6 different institutional funds over the course of 3 rounds of capital. Folks like Alexis Ohanian, Elad Gil. We also launched a meta community for community builders called Community Club. The domain's community.club. It's basically just like a safe space for anybody in the community building world to connect with one another, learn, upskill, find a job, knowledge share. That also evolved into us launching a venture fund, which we call the Club Fund, where we're actually investing in community-driven companies where community is kind of at the core to their mission statement, or for founders that are building tools and infrastructure to further the community industry. My most recent project is a company called Launch House, where we're actually creating a physical center of gravity in LA as of right now, where we're bringing together a bunch of top investors, influencers, people you might see on TikTok with millions of followers, and founders together to create a bunch of magic. You can kind of think of it, to put it simply, as like Y Combinator meets the Sway House or meets the TikTok Hype House. So there's a lot of interesting, awesome stuff happening there. But that's more or less me and my background. I'm excited to share with everybody today just kind of a bunch of random musings, honestly, on my journey through community building world, interesting things that you guys may not have known of, as well as do a bit of a deep dive and case study on some of the projects and companies that I've started. So I got my community building journey started when I was probably 10, 11, 12 years old. And I was the kid that never outgrew his childhood hobby of building with Legos, the children's plastic building block. And on that note, I love how the crypto community has adopted this term of money Legos. I'm seeing it all over the Substacks that I subscribe to and Twitter. So it's kind of interesting there that now I've started to dive deep down the crypto rabbit hole. And it kind of comes full circle because it's back to the way that I got my start with online communities. And on that note, just to preface, I'm actually honestly kind of a total crypto noob, but I have spent the past few months going as deep as possible, just trying to go into straight sponge mode, learn as much as I can, join and be an active participant in as many communities as I possibly can fit within my schedule. But I used to run a bunch of different forums with adult Lego community builders. Turns out there's an entire underground adult Lego economy where there's all these folks that, they're not kids playing with these things. They're adults that are building these like massive 30, 40, 50, 60, 100,000 piece creations in some cases. And they're buying and selling individual bricks on marketplaces. So I scaled that to an e-commerce business, a sizable e-commerce business for a teenager, in addition to being involved in a bunch of online Lego community forums that I'd helped started and curate, as well as a bunch of in-person Lego conferences. So that was kind of my initial indoctrination into, I guess, the wild world of internet communities. I did dabble in crypto a number of years back in like 2011 when Bitcoin was just getting started. I ran a business that I won't go into too many details on. You can probably jump to conclusions based on what you're seeing on the screen right now. But Bitcoin was our payment processing solution of choice. But to dive right in and skip over my backstory, because I'm sure you guys have heard enough. I want to talk a little bit about what exactly I like to think about community as being defined as. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for anybody interested in this space, is just wrapping their head around what exactly the heck it means. I mean, it's such like a catch-all, nebulous, ambiguous term. So I always like to think about putting guardrails around it and helping folks understand, what exactly it means, even though it can come in so many different shapes and forms. And one of the ways that I like to think about it and start to draw a delineation is around the concept of like a audience versus a community. So if you think about an audience-based platform, or like a broadcasting platform like Twitter, or a podcast, or a newsletter, or Instagram for that matter. And Twitter might even be like a bad example here, because something like Twitter is a little bit more of a hybrid, where it's like they have some community-like features, but at its core, it's like an audience broadcasting feature, even though you can do things like comment. But what really makes it an audience versus a community is the fact that there are one-to-one connections between you as the broadcaster, or the tweeter, or the creator, and the followers, and the people that are interacting with you. It's a series of different one-to-one relationships when you think about it mathematically. That's more or less an audience. Now, a network or a community, that is fundamentally different, because it's actually a series of many-to-many relationships between and among members. And when you think about that mathematically, 500 people following you on Twitter versus 500 people in a community in the form of like a Telegram chat channel, like we have at Karma DAO, or a Discord community, or a Slack, or a meetup, or a forum, when you do the combinatorial math and the different ways in which folks can uniquely connect with one another, it actually ends up resulting in exponentially more different ways in which these people can interact with one another. So when you have many-to-many connections in a community versus an audience, which is more one-to-one or broadcasting, it's exponentially more powerful. So that's one of the simple frameworks that I like to always use and think about when I'm trying to delineate between, like, okay, what exactly is a community? How does it fit into the broader definition of what are the types of audiences or broadcasting tools or platforms that might be out there? But I also think that's like a little bit more like the mathematical definition of how to start to think about a community. But a more qualitative way to wrap your head around it is just a simple two-step framework. And one that I always like to go back to is this concept of like a community is basically two easy to grok things. It's one, it's a reason for people to gather, and it's a reason for people to come together in the first place. And then number two, it's a reason for people to keep gathering, or to regather, or to gather on a continual, perpetual basis. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges with people that want to either build communities or get involved with communities, is that they get really hyped about this idea of like coming together, joining a group chat, joining a community, or putting folks together in one place, but then they fail to give them a reason and a solid understanding as to why they should keep coming back for more, and why they need to come back on a continual basis, why they need to basically build this community into their habit flow, and have it be something that they check on a daily, weekly basis and contribute to. So that's kind of like I think the way I start to think about community, both from like a mathematical standpoint, right? It's like many to many versus one to one, as well as like it basically has to be like a movement. It has to be a really strong, compelling reason to gather, and then there has to be a bunch of like series of like traditions or great content or events or just happenings within the community that get people to keep gathering and keep coming back for more. So those are kind of the two different ways I like to start to think about community and how it coalesces into an actual definition. Because again, it is such a challenging thing to I think to understand and wrap your head around, because the definition gets used so willy-nilly and in such a catch-all manner. So the other thing that I think a lot of folks do when they start to learn a little bit more about community is they over-index to the platform as opposed to like the purpose and the reason for gathering. So what we just talked about in the last slide was that the essence of community is all about folks coming together around like a mission, right? It's about building something that makes people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, right? It's like an emotional response. It's like a part of someone's identity. And I think a lot of folks oftentimes gloss over that and they jump straight to this, which is like, what platform is my community going to exist on? What tools am I going to use? Like, what's the functional ways in which these members are going to interact? And I'd argue that actually matters 10x less than the purpose and the reason for folks coming together. Like, successful communities can theoretically exist anywhere, honestly, and they can exist with any sort of combination of tools, even if it's the most hacked together solutions. I mean, I'd argue that like having a Telegram chat and a bunch of Google Drives and stuff like we have at Karma DAO, like it's not the most elegant solution for a community, but guess what? It works, and the reason and purpose and thing that we're all bought into, and the reason that we're here, and the reason that we're gathering is so strong and compelling. It doesn't freaking matter what tools that you're using to facilitate the community experience. So I think the purpose and the reason for gathering matters so much more than any sort of tools that you might be leveraging for the community. And this right here, I'm going to send along a link. Let's see if I can get up Zoom chat here while I'm sharing my screen. 1 second. This is a post that we wrote. There's a link. There's also an Airtable doc if anyone wants to take a look at all these different community tools in more of like a tabular view. But this is a post that we put out into the world a few months ago, where we basically cataloged and indexed all the different community tools that might be out there and ways in which you can facilitate digital or IRL community experiences. And the craziest thing from this, the craziest stat here is that like I think close to 60 to 70% of the tools were built in like the past year and a half. So we're seeing like a Cambrian explosion right now of different community tools and infrastructure being built to facilitate people to gather in a many-to-many format, as we talked about earlier, online in ways in which they've never really ever been able to do before. And another really interesting thing is that we're actually starting to see the early inklings of this explosion as well in Web 3.0 tools. So what I show you here is all kind of just like, I think, improvements on existing ways in which people were already gathering, right? Like everything here is kind of like the unbundling of like a Reddit or LinkedIn, or it's like a better version of Slack, or a slightly differentiated version of like Discord or WhatsApp, or these chat apps and these things that have existed for or Meetup or Eventbrite, these things that have existed, or Zoom, that have existed for a while. But now what we're starting to see is a whole new host of what I'd call like Web 3.0 community tools, which some of you guys might be familiar with, and I'm frankly still learning a lot about this space. And one of the things that I'm working on is basically creating a similar type of framework to this, but for any sort of crypto or Web 3.0 tools, or ones that leverage social tokens or crypto in unique ways that have never really been utilized in the community space before. So on the topic of community tools, I think this would be a good time to segue into a case study on the company that I co-founded 3 years ago called Comsor, where, like I said, we were building enterprise community tools for companies. So the main kind of thesis behind building this company was that we were seeing a big paradigm shift in the way in which organizations are thinking about community, leveraging community, treating community, and that's that the customer journey is the future was going to be powered by this concept of like a community or a network around your business, which is fundamentally different than a lot of traditional ways of thinking about building a company, where maybe distribution didn't matter as much, or you kind of lived or died by like a very purposeful linear sales and marketing funnel, where you want to get folks from one aspect of your marketing initiative to the next, to a conversion. And the other thing is, community used to be treated as a silo within a lot of larger organizations. It was something that was just kind of a side project, or it wasn't really given any tender love and care at all. And in the context of this paradigm shift, what we're seeing is actually like a move to the center, where community is actually becoming kind of like this core engine that drives and touches every single aspect of a business. So I can give some examples of this if you guys are curious, but maybe a good analog to to connect some dots here would be to think about what happened in like the world of data science. Like I talked about at the beginning, I came from the data science world. I ran like an internal data science team at a big bank, big, slow, clunky 150-year-old organization. And when I started, our data team was sitting in a silo. We did we did not talk to any of the other teams. And by the time I left, the data team had grown from 3 people to like an organization of 30. And it was squarely at the center where every department realized they had to become data driven in order to survive and thrive. So it was a very similar model where like data teams used to be really small, siloed. It was just like lone statisticians, hacking away at data sets in a silo. And then companies realized, okay, we need to take these teams, put them front and center, make sure that they have dotted lines in every single facet of the organization or of the business so that they can become data driven and do their jobs 10x better. And that's, I think, the exact same like paradigm shift, or that was our thesis, right? That we're going to see the same paradigm shift with community, because community has such a powerful way to impact all the different functions of a business. Like you don't have to do sales and marketing if your customers or people in your network or users of your product are doing the marketing for you, and they're going out and espousing your product and selling it on your behalf. Sales relationships are a lot easier to close if people have been warmed by the community. Organizations that are able to build large communities and passionate user bases around their products, they're able to go then and fish in these ponds for hiring and recruiting. They have to spend significantly less money on customer support and initiatives to retain their customers, because they are able to basically offer free customer support through the community, or they're able to offer something more than a product experience where they can marry a community with a product, and then boom, people are getting twice the value compared to an organization that doesn't offer a product with a community. So there's all these different unique ways in which community can start to, when you draw the dotted lines out like this, can start to really powerfully change a business. And we saw that, in the early days of commerce, like a lot of companies were starting to take notice of this. So the old world, in the old way, companies were thinking about community, like I said, was a very siloed initiative. It was like these one-to-one or like one-to-many networks, like social media, like audience tools, like we talked about at the beginning. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Or maybe we have a shitty support forum. So that was kind of like the old world of community, right? It was community as a silo. It was community as like an audience, basically, right? A one-to-one network, not nearly as valuable as the exponentially powerful new world that you see on the right, like we talked about, when you can create these many-to-many experiences. Like if you had 500 people like you on Facebook versus 500 people talking to you on about your product in a community, that, like we talked about, there's exponentially more ways in which those folks can connect, create value for and with one another, or for your brand or your organization or your protocol in the crypto world. So that's kind of the paradigm shift and the things that we were seeing in the space. And I'll show you a few quick examples of this just to bring it to life in more of like the enterprise world. So here's a company, it's called Lattice. They went through Y Combinator a few years ago. They raised a ton of money, very successful, well-known HR software. And they started this community called We Heart Humans. It was completely separate from the brand. They have like a newsletter that they put under their community umbrella. They have a magazine. They have a 10,000 person Slack community. They have an ambassador program, a job board where they offer valuable HR bases. This is a way to offer value to their members. They have a series of different private events, all these different things that kind of coalesce under this umbrella of like their community that they've built around their business. And in an old world, a company would have just had a like us here on Facebook page, which does not drive nearly as much value as something like this. And as a result, like this company Lattice basically gets all of their sales organically through bottoms up adoption for their software product through this community. Another example is this company called Spendesk. They have a community for their target audience, which is the CFO. They make a financial software. And again, very similar type of thing. They have a series of different events, an online exclusive Slack community just for CFOs. They launched a podcast that they wrap under this community umbrella. They have meetups in every major city in a pre-COVID era. Just a lot of awesome stuff going on there. But again, this is the new paradigm that organizations are waking up to, is that they need to have a community. It can no longer be a one-to-one network that's exponentially less powerful. But here's the challenge, and this is the core value prop of Comstor, and the problem that we were solving with our business, and that's that community building actually is very challenging. Most companies, even if they're investing in community, their community team exists kind of in a silo. They have no good data, no analytics, no understanding if the time and energy that they're putting into their community is actually creating value for the company or for the organization. And I know a lot of projects in the crypto world, they face this as well. Like they spend all this time and energy cultivating this community, but they have no analytics to understand if the time and energy and marketing budget and developer initiatives, all these types of things are actually contributing back to like the growth metrics that they need to track to understand the health of the protocol or of the organization or of the business if it's profit and revenue driven. So that was kind of the core challenge. And anytime you're operating, a marketing department, right? It's all about $1 in. Can I get $2 out? And they basically just had an inability to tell that story. So that's kind of where the platform came in. And I can give you guys a quick demo if you're curious to check it out and kind of some of the ways in which we solve these problems. So the core of the product was basically a CRM where we centralized all the data from a company's community initiatives, pulled it into one unified dashboard, and then built a series of different analytics and insights on top of it. So in this example, we're able to pull in a unified 360-degree profile on Mac who is active in this company's Slack community, where we have a bunch of different metrics on how they're engaging and interacting in that. If they're a developer on their GitHub, MailChimp newsletter, discourse forum, all these different places in which community might be happening. We pull all that data in. We also go out and scrape LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, all these different, like 37 different data sources to pull in a unified view of your community members, as well as like how they're interacting and engaging with you. So are they attending events? Is there like a chronological timeline that we can take a look at? And eventually, you would, with this data, you could do things like rank for the top members, who's used to engage, who's not engaging anymore. Can we be more purposeful and intentional and data driven about the way in which we're cultivating our community and devoting time and resources to it? So that also comes with a series of different aggregate analytics. We have workflow builders and automations, kind of like Zapier, but for your community. I won't go too much into the details, but that's more or less the high level demo of what the product looked like and how we were starting to solve that problem of, what does my community actually look like? Oops. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit earlier in the chat, and that's like, how is community basically different than the traditional marketing funnel? And like the traditional marketing funnel at companies, it's very much just a linear exercise, right? It's like, can we get people from point A to point B? And what happens when you're marketing to folks in a traditional marketing experience is that it's a series of one-off touch points with people, which is, it's very different than like building a relationship with someone, which looks a little bit more something like this. Like community is kind of the antithesis to a traditional marketing funnel. Community is almost like, it's like a network around your business. It's like spheres of influence or like rings of influence. And like people can be coming in from different velocities. They can, be super engaged at one point and maybe not as much later on. But the core thing is like, once someone joins your community, they're kind of yours, and it becomes like a perpetually warmed lead, which is very different from a traditional marketing funnel where, if you get somebody to the interest or evaluation or engagement phase, and they're reading your emails, they're attending your webinars, they're doing whatever, and then they drop off, guess what? They're gone. But as soon as you can get a deeper level of engagement with someone and get them into like a tighter like ring of influence around you, they're in your Slack community, they're in your Discord, they're in your Telegram channel, they're actually taking these like higher order, like deeper actions with you. It's a way to keep them closer to you. And, in the software world, there's like this heuristic that says something like only like 4% of your target market is actually in the like your target customers, like in the market to buy your product or subscribe at like any point in time. So, but guess what? It means that if you're operating out of a traditional marketing funnel, as opposed to community, you're like, you're spending your time on like 96% of the wrong people because it's not the right time for them. But if you have all those folks in a community, that means that basically no matter when they're in the market for your solution, you already have a relationship built with them, and you can strike when the iron's hot. So we actually decided to put this kind of philosophy and thesis to the test. So about a little over a year and a half ago, when we were an early stage company, we decided to launch a community for our target audience, which was the community builder. And this is the community club that I mentioned earlier. Let me pull it up. I'd love to show you guys. So we decided to build this safe space for folks in our industry to connect with one another. It actually, interestingly enough, started as an audience. So we started as a newsletter and Twitter account, and then we've since expanded to a forum, a Slack community, mentorship program. We have resources and content library. We launched a venture fund on top of this because we realized we had insane deal flow for any founders that were building tools in the community space. And as a result of creating this initiative and this community that, again, is completely separately branded from our company, only very subtly do we associate the two, we never spent a dime on marketing, zero. Other than the salary of our community team, we never did any sort of cold outbound emails, never had to proactively outreach to get a customer interested in us. We basically got our first $1 million in sales, like $10 million in enterprise LOIs, like purely through this community from bottoms up adoption, where we were basically able to build a trusted relationship with folks first, and then they organically found their way into our sales pipeline later. So I think that is a really powerful illustration of how community can be the ultimate flywheel for a business. And here's the crazy thing is that, most organizations, they haven't realized this yet. So there's kind of an arbitrage opportunity right now between where basically this stuff clearly works. I mean, our company is case in point, and the few examples that I showed you are great examples of it, but not many people are doing it because it's hard, because it's challenging. So I think the ones that do figure this out and that do start investing more and more in community, they're going to have an advantage, but that advantage is going to get priced out sooner rather than later. So I always tell companies that I consult or advise, or that I just happen to chat with, that they should be investing in community now before it becomes a saturated channel, like most of these things do. Now, the interesting thing here is that organizations like ours at ComStore, organizations like the ones that we sell to, organizations like the ones that I'm talking about here that are becoming and getting interested in community, like I like to call those community-driven organizations. And this is where I think crypto and tokenization and all these things and DAOs are so fascinating. And that's because in the old paradigm, pre-community, it was basically just like brands playing from a traditional marketing and sales playbook. Now you've seen companies like ComStore, like the ones that I showed you, that are basically able to build billion-dollar Airbnb is another great example, one that leveraged community. They're able to build the billion-dollar companies by putting community at the center and letting it be the flywheel that runs their entire business and sales and marketing and distribution engine on autopilot. But what's most interesting is that we're kind of be moving towards a world where I think it's going to be less about community-driven companies and more about community-owned companies, where in this middle example, right, where the world's kind of moving to right now, even though I showed you in this slide based on the stats, it's still pretty early days. Guess who all the value is accruing to? That in the ecosystem, in the network, in the community. You have all these amazing people contributing time, energy, engagement, participation. They're creating value for the community and for the company. And guess where it goes? It goes straight to the founders, goes straight to the investors, goes straight to the early employees. And sure, that's great. But the thing is, and it's clearly worked. But I think the thing is, we're moving more towards like an ownership economy where that is no longer going to fly. And there's going to be a select few companies, I think, over the next few years that start to figure out ways to do this, basically redistribute the value that's being created by the network as a whole to the network participants. And that's going to come in the form of tokenization, DAOs. Again, I'm still learning on all this stuff, kind of a crypto noob. So please let me know if I'm screwing up any of the terminology. But I think, things like jam session and karma, like these are all fascinating experiments for what is yet to come in the future. I mean, these are all small scale things, but imagine big companies with the size and scope of like Uber that start to do this, or new companies that we can't even fathom yet that can get bigger than Uber's scale and build $1 trillion market cap companies because they're able to mobilize human beings and create incentives that have never before been humanly possible without tokenization. So I think the future is just fascinating here in this regard. So I wanted to quickly talk next about some things on community business models. So this is somewhat related to what we talked about earlier in the conversation. where we went through like the big matrix of all the community tools and the landscape of all these tools that are out there. And I think I just wanted to encourage everyone to think beyond just like one tool or a singular platform. Like when you think of Karma DAO, like don't think of it as a Telegram group. Like think of it as like a movement, and that movement is gonna can have like a bunch of different tentacles and expand. And here's a good example of one that I've seen like evolve really rapidly, really recently. It's this community that started as a Slack group called Product Marketing Alliance. It's a community for product marketers. And over like the course of 9 months, they've now launched like 20 different initiatives that all fall under this like umbrella of like the Product Marketing Alliance community brand. So they've got like a podcast, they have a private membership program, they have like credentials for folks in this industry, they have paid courses, they've got still have the Slack community, they have local chapters in every major city, they churn out research reports, they have a job board where they charge companies to post for access to the community. They have resources, virtual events, like all these different things that go well beyond the Slack community. So I think this is a good way to start thinking about how a community can basically be much more than just a chat group, or a community can be just more than like a singular tool or a singular platform. But the challenge is like getting the kind of the balance right between what different ways to monetize and create like a sustainable business model, which are value additive to members versus like value extractive to members. So this is just a chart that I've on some writing I'm doing that I'm thinking through. Please feel free to chime in on the chat if you have any thoughts here. But the way I've been kind of starting to wrangle all of this community business model stuff is on a simple like 2-axis framework. It's like how much money is accruing to the community leaders or the community builders. On the Y, on the X, it's like what's the like the cost essentially of that monetization, right? Is this something that's like extractive for members, or is it something that's a little bit more additive and like positive and beneficial for members? So something that's super extractive to members might be something like advertisements, right? Like think all the programmatic algorithmically driven stuff you see in your social feed. It doesn't make that much money. You need incredible scale to get an ad network to work. And it kind of sucks because you're just taking advantage of users' data. Compare that to something like what we did at the community fund, where we actually launched an investment, like a venture capital fund on top of our community, on top of the community club, where we were basically able to make a potentially, theoretically, right, these things have long feedback loops, but make a lot of money from investing in the proprietary deal flow that we had from our network. But at the same time, like we are investing in companies that are coming out of our community. So we are reinvesting back in the community. That's hugely value additive. People love that. It's incredible. Or things like sponsorships, where it doesn't really feel like an ad. It's like a brand that's coming in. They generally like have to align the message of the brand with like the way that the community feels. So, and usually sponsors, they offer like discounts and like amazing free perks and stuff to community members. So that's like an example of one that's more towards the value additive side, and it can still make a lot of money. So that's kind of one of the ways that I'm thinking about just a lens through which to look at community business models. And one thing that I think is the most interesting is this concept of like tokenization that I put up at the right, where I think it has the potential to basically like if you align the incentives right, to create a much more valuable network as a whole for everybody, including the community leader, than could be without it. And it also is value additive because guess what? The members are then getting to reap in the rewards and benefit of the community and the experience that they're creating. And I'll pause there if anyone wants to jump in with thoughts in the Zoom chat. Or I'm not sure if this is a webinar. You can unmute yourself and hop in as well. I have a few more slides though, so I can keep going.
No, it's great so far. Please, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so with that, I guess I want to do another quick little deep dive on one of the next ventures that have in the works, which is Launch House. And the whole theory behind Launch House is that in this co-living movement is something that has been around since the dawn of Silicon Valley. I mean, like the majority of the largest companies in the world, all the FANGs, they were all started in co-living hacker houses. They were started in garages. And part of the reason for this is because you have such like a high degree of collaboration, the ability to put really smart people together in one place and like shorten the feedback loops tremendously when you have folks like eating, sleeping, and breathing together. So that's kind of the thinking behind this idea of like bringing entrepreneurs and influencers and founders and really brilliant driven folks together in one place for a co-living situation. And that's kind of the idea behind what we did at Launch House. And we tested this down in Mexico a month ago, and we're now moving it to LA. It's becoming a much more legitimized operation. The big vision for it is kind of to become almost like a media company. Think like MTV meets Silicon Valley. And the idea is like we want to bring all these remarkable people together in one place to create like an IRL community, and then be very public about it and help them get distribution and eyeballs and publicity and hype for their products or for their personal brands or for whatever they're building. Because we're entering an era where the venture check is becoming more and more commoditized. The ability to build software is becoming more and more commoditized. But guess what isn't commoditized? It's the ability to get your product in front of the right people, build an audience, build a community, build a personal brand. So that's kind of one of the other things that we're looking to help solve with Launch House, is not only put all these folks together in one place to help their ideas get 10x better by living in a co-living scenario, but also give them the ability to have like a launch pad for instant distribution. And this is kind of like one of the working concept on the business model. So the idea is essentially we're going to have like, we're starting with the house in LA in January. We've got like a sweet $15 million mansion out in Beverly Hills. And we're eventually going to expand, horizontally to different types of houses. Maybe we'll do a theme. Maybe we'll do a crypto house. I don't really know. But and underlying all of that is like a robust digital community where we're bringing together a bunch of folks to collaborate online. We're going to have an app, and then at the top of the house is this concept of like basically creating a media company, where we're going to partner with a bunch of different influencers, have our own content that we produce in order to document what's happening with these founders while they're building in the house, as well as just kind of raise, I think, the profile of entrepreneurship within like the broader media and entertainment world itself, right? Because Silicon Valley is in tech Twitter is kind of like a bubble right now, and I think there's a big opportunity, especially for companies that are looking to go direct to consumer or that are selling to D2C, to get access to like a wider audience. So you didn't hear this here, but we may or may not have a Netflix show in the works as well. So a lot of interesting stuff going on with that. And we just opened up applications for our next iteration of Launch House in LA, which is starting in January. Here's some examples of awesome folks that we had there this past month. We had Alex, who's an awesome pillar within the crypto community, great buddy of mine. I think he's actually in Karma DAO as well. Luba, she's a Silicon Valley influencer. Brett, he's a Substack think boy. Nathan Latka, he's a SaaS podcaster, influencer, Wall Street Journal bestselling author, runs a $100 million venture debt fund. So like a lot of awesome, really fascinating folks that are a part of this. So I can drop a link in the chat if anyone here is interested in checking out what we're up to in more details, or might know of anyone that could potentially be interested in being a part of this. So that's Launch House. And I guess only other interesting thing that I'll tease out there is I'm actually working on a stealth project with not going to reveal too many details yet, but if you're interested in chatting more, you can just hit me up on Twitter. I'll share on Twitter DM only. But basically the mission behind the project is looking to bridge the gap between the crypto community building world and I guess the traditional community building world, which is more or less where I come from. Because I think the barrier to mass adoption is large, and it's one of both an infrastructure problem. I mean, even like to get into like a community like this, Karma DAO, it's this hacked together, cobbled together set of, like you have to mint this token on Roll. It's still an up and coming platform. You've got it's called Collabland, MetaMask. Like, look, I'm pretty technologically savvy, and it took me forever to figure out how that thing works. So like, how is the average consumer going to do it? Like, there's just a gap, a few years in infrastructure. There's a gap in education and knowledge and understanding and the right level of abstraction on top of crypto tools in order for these things to get mass adoption. Like, 90% of Americans like don't even understand how the U.S. economy works. Like, how the heck are they going to understand like an invisible, social token economy or something? It's just there's a lot of infrastructure and educational challenges that we're going to have to overcome as an industry in order to make this really change the way that communities operate forever and build those community owned orgs that I talked about at the beginning, beyond just the crypto bubble. Like it's already happening here within crypto world, but this, if it's gonna, if the next Uber is basically, if we're gonna see like a tokenized version of like Uber, some sort of large, massive $1 trillion business like that, it's gonna take a while to get adopted. So that's the mission and the mantra behind my next project. And if anyone's interested in getting involved, like I said, just hit me up on Twitter or Telegram, wherever. More details to be revealed soon. So that's everything I had today. Hopefully I left some time for Q&A. My voice is getting tired.
Yeah, great stuff. And there's so much parallel problems and gaps that I can relate to that I'm currently undergoing right now. What's your opinion on finite communities that have a beginning and end, or do you think that even serves a need?
I do think finite communities are okay. Like there's nothing wrong with a community for a day or a community for a week or, a community for a month. Like I guess you could think about like Launch House as basically the IRL component of it. It's like community for a month for the folks that are living there. But then we are introducing a digital community where the action never stops. It's going to be 24/7 folks talking. So they can complement each other. I think they can exist and be successful. Like, every major like conference in like a pre-COVID world was effectively like a community for a day. And like, that's fine. And actually I've seen a lot of conferences in the age of COVID try to launch like communities on like Slack or Discord. And they failed. They would get 1,000 people to join them because they were able to harness like this big email list and this energy around like a past in-person event. But then what they learned is once they put everybody digitally and let them run wild, the conversation died off very quickly. Nobody came back. They had a really strong reason to gather, a strong reason to keep gathering. If you remember my 2-step formula at the beginning, like community's a reason to gather and a reason to keep gathering, because the pull just wasn't strong enough. So I think it is okay to lean into this concept of like a short-term finite community in time length. So Udai had a question in Zoom. What's the business model of Launch House? We're still figuring out the business model of Launch House. We have a number of different revenue streams. Like we're investing in companies that come out of the house, taking carry. We're partnering with a number of different venture capital firms. We have a bunch of company sponsors as well, and all the media content that we're creating is going to be sponsored. And we're pretty much breaking even on rent from any sort of residents that are staying there. But the idea is that like Launch House is kind of more of like a media company than the next Soho House. So there's big opportunity for brand sponsorships. As of right now, is there any plan to expand the business to other areas like Asia? As of right now, we're sticking with just the US. And I mean, in a post-COVID world, like after there's a vaccine and global travel opens up, and if this does really become a big thing, I see no reason that it wouldn't expand internationally. We actually have one guy who was in the last Launch House. He's like this brilliant Princeton grad who they just got a YC interview actually from an idea they started on day one of Launch House, which is exciting. And he came from Tokyo. And he's like, yeah, like I want to do this in Japan. Can I like license the Launch House brand and like do my own version of this? So yeah, maybe that's an option as well, as like getting awesome community members to license this and create their own version of Launch House somewhere else in the world.
You mentioned briefly that you're thinking of ways to bridge like the traditional community building to crypto community building. I think you've been kind of exploring the crypto space in the community here past few months, and it's great to have you in Karma DAO as well. So I think it's definitely a cutting edge crypto community that we have here. I guess, can we get like a sneak peek maybe? You mentioned we can DM you on Twitter, or do you want to like maybe share some insights, some of the differences, or give a sneak peek in terms of what you had in mind?
Yeah, I mean, the core of it right now is effectively just creating a tokenized community. And being really purposeful and intentional about the types of folks we're bringing in, as well as like the types of things that we're going to be creating as a community. So drawing a lot of inspirations from like what Jam has done really well in terms of mobilizing a lot of people who are passionate about elevating that space and contributing. So we're doing potentially doing a lot of similar things with folks that care passionately about the mission statement that I talked about, who kind of want to educate the broader world about how we can start to continue to bridge these two worlds. And it's still relatively early stage, admittedly, but have a lot of really deep crypto folks that are kind of helping me out and helping me learn fast. Because like I said, still learning a lot about this world, and I'll be humble and straightforward. Like I don't know what I don't know at this point. So got to lean on the community as much as I can. Being a community guy, I guess.
Very cool. Jacob, awesome talk. Community owned is what made me like dive deep into crypto. So it was really exciting to hear you talk on these topics, and I feel like you really hit the nail on the head. Really exciting stuff to see this future that we all can see glimpses of. So yeah, thanks for sharing, man. Really awesome. The question I had for you is, it's interesting to hear about Launch House, and I think one of the trends in crypto, Twitter, and even outside of that is like building in public, and just talking to the benefits of what can happen once you do kind of be more public with your work, and how more collaborative you can get with the community and distribution, more awareness. So Launch House seems to touch on that. One thing I've been thinking about is, do you think that, can you see that putting pressure on people to, like, because of all these advantages that come to it, do you see that putting pressure on people to build more in public, to the point where people who aren't doing it are going to be at a disadvantage? Because I myself am a private guy. I like to stay low key. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'd say that even if you're not building your company in public and being open and transparent about like the inner workings of like your business and your decisions you're making, your business model, or you don't want to be on camera, I think even the folks that are much more private, or like introverted, not even saying that's what you are. I'm just saying, I'm just characterizing more generically.
Not wrong.
I do think that even folks like that, they can still be public about their thoughts and opinionated, and you have to be opinionated about the way in which you think an industry is going to evolve. You have to be opinionated about the way in which your solution to a problem is 10x better, 100x, 1000x better than anything else that's even remotely out there. Otherwise, you're never going to build trust with customers. You're never going to build trust with users or whatnot. You're not going to start a movement. So I do think that startups of the future they're not going to, or startups or protocols, whatever, they're not going to be, they can't borrow from a past playbook. They have to create a movement that has to be something more of like a religion. And in order to do that, you don't have to be public about the business or like your day-to-day decisions or vlogging your life, but I think you do have to be public and really loud and really boisterous and opinionated about the vision and the mission, and galvanize folks to join you along that in like a Jesus type sense. So that's I think that's what all successful founders are going to need to adopt, and it's very possible, especially in an age where like you can hide behind an anonymous Twitter account and get 60,000 followers, and it's very possible.
Yeah, like kind of like a healthy cult with transparent and openness, and very cool, man. I'll definitely be hitting you up on Twitter to hear more about your project. You left us all curious, so I definitely want to know more.
Cool.
I have a quick question. For the people that have gone through the Launch House or Clubhouse, or just people that have just gone through what you've built, what percentage of them have been in crypto compared to regular technology?
I'd say like 30%. So in the last house, we had like 15 people, 5 were crypto folks.
I'm sorry?
About 30%. So last house we had 15 people, and I'd say 5 of them were crypto folks.
Okay. Is there a general theme with the others on what they do?
Admittedly, a little bit all over the place, and I think that's kind of intentional. Like, we're trying to keep it broad. I think you have a better melting pot of ideas and like a better breeding ground for collaboration and interesting viewpoints when you're not too focused. Maybe there's a future world where we get more themed, but as of right now, it's a little bit broad intentionally.
And I'm assuming they're all generally like pretty like social on Twitter and stuff like that.
For the most part, and the ones that weren't coming in, by the end of it, they left being really, really excited about it, because to Adrian's point, like, or to my point to Adrian, like, it's like if you want to, I think if you want to be a really successful founder that builds something big, you have to create a movement, and it doesn't mean you have to like build in public or be too personal about your life. but like you do have to galvanize the masses or in a passionate, loyal group of folks around you. And that's really honestly impossible unless you're leveraging the tools and like Twitter and places that people are spending a lot of their time.
Totally agree. So we'll leave it up for questions for another minute or so, and then we'll wrap it up and you can give any last thoughts.
Well,
Seems like,
Thank you.
oh, there we go. Okay.
No, I don't have any question, but thanks. It's informative and insightful.
Yeah, I totally agree. So if you'd like to wrap up, we can you can just give anything else you'd like to reach out to ConradDAO, for the members to check out, any things to note. It's all you to wrap it up.
Yeah, I can't thank you guys enough for the time. It's been such a privilege. Very excited to share a lot of the things that I've picked up over the past few years, and I'm excited to be a core member here at ConradDAO. Like I said, you can hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on Telegram, or if you want to schedule a call, I'm always eager to chat and jam on this type of stuff. It's all I think about. So take care everyone. Appreciate the time.
Awesome.